All right, let's get started. So the first thing is status updates. I could give you a simple one from, I believe, last week in regards to the docs website. Um, we added a search functionality to the docs website based on a service provided by Algolia, I believe. So that's been integrated. Along with that, we made a couple tweaks to the main menu and how that is presented in mobile. So hopefully all that is working well. We don't have analytics right now. I think that's a question that's come up a bit, but it would be interesting to know like the usage for some of that. So that might be something that I follow up with leadership about whether or not we could get some analytics going through just the standard Google Analytics. Any other status updates?
I guess the migration guides will be released soon. Since we just released the spec and yeah, for Buildpack API, like moving to 0.6, both in Buildpack API and platform API.
Is the platform, what's the platform version? Is it also 0.6?
Yeah, 0.6. Yeah.
All right, anything else?
I'm just undrafting those PRs right now for the docs. So they could be reviewed.
Awesome. Okay, moving on from status updates, user research. Is this still a standing item that we want to review every single week?
So my update last week was I need to talk to Sam when he gets Sam Panado when he gets back from vacation, and he's back from vacation. So I need to go ping him. I'll do that right now.
Get with Sam P. All right, added that. Okay, next is unlabeled issues. We have a few. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, we'll start at the bottom, document support for Podman V2. I wonder, this does sound like a platform team concern for the most part, given that it speaks a little bit to the usage within Pack. Or it's actually strictly speaking about Pack. So unless there's any objections, I'll go ahead and associate it with them. All right, the next one is new field in Buildpack Tamil. Okay, this sounds like in implementations. Cool. All right, and support to change the location. Okay, I did see this one. So technically this isn't possible with Pack right now, right? There's like a feature request in here where we would need Pack to be able to change the directory in which the source code is uploaded into. Does anybody know if we have that sort of issue in Pack yet?
I don't think so. Well, I didn't check, so. This might have come from that, there was a Stack Overflow question that Joe linked to in the general Slack, and I responded to it. This might be the same person.
Oh, this is terrible. Yeah, I don't see anything.
Why don't you just move it to pack for now?
True. I like that solution. Okay, what the hell is the transfer issue? There you go. All right, so we'll leave that there. The platform team will go ahead and groom it. Let's make sure it has a triage. And we could go from there. Punted. Perfect. Okay, I believe that was all the issues we had. Perfect. And we could now continue down our list. So we have the agenda item for an intro video. I think we have the person that suggested that here. Do they want to speak to it?
Yeah, I can speak to it. So like a few weeks ago, I just had an idea to maybe we can create an intro video, just about 1 minute, explaining what Buildpacks are. I don't have like a real vision on how should it be, but I think, I mean, I saw many videos that trying to explain what products are doing, and like it can be very helpful to explain to others who it is, I mean, who Buildpacks are for and how can it help others. And I'm not sure how to continue with this. And I would love to get some. I mean, Javier and I had a discussion yesterday talking about how to move forward with this, but if anyone has an idea on how to do this, I would love to hear.
Yeah, I guess part of me wonders like the involvement of the core team. And the reason why I asked that, or why that comes to my mind, is because this is ultimately going to be a projection of what the project is all about. And I know Anthony and I have been speaking to like the complexities of this project, given the large scope of its audience, right? Like we talk about the app developer, we could talk about the operator, and we could even talk about the implementers, right? Like people that are implementing platforms based on Cloud-Native Buildpacks. So given at like every single one of these levels, I think the conversation could be slightly different. I would want to make sure that whatever we create is generic enough to, speak to the project as a whole, but also useful enough that people gather what it's about in a very short time frame, right? As opposed to just, I don't know, things that they could just look at within the rest of the website.
I totally agree. I think that Buildpacks, like our project, is pretty. I mean, it's hard to explain to people what's doing because there are so many people. I mean, different people that can use it in a different ways. And I think this is one of the main things that I thought about when thinking about this intro video. It just to explain people, if you are this kind of person, you can use it. But also if you're doing something else, you can also use it in a different way. So I'm not sure how to make it. It should be short and clear.
Yeah. Yeah, I think definitely, I believe the app developer use case is pretty solid, right? It's like, hey, just pack build, specify a builder and your stuff, your application magically gets compiled into an image, right? Then there's the operator, which is like a lot of day 2 operations. You keep your stuff up to date. you could set what kind of blessed artifacts could be used, right? And the app developers could only use within this builder, right? Or stuff like that. I think the one that maybe we've been lacking, although I think it's been doing fine, is the implementers, the platform implementers, right? Kind of speaking to the fact that our project isn't just tooling for, again, these two other personas. It's about a specification that anybody could integrate to create a platform, right? Or provide the sort of functionality.
Or write a build pack if they're willing to do so.
Yeah, that's the other, like, that's a persona for what we document. I'm not sure that that's a persona that we sell to, right? Like that would be vendors, like ISVs.
Yeah, we should definitely think, who is this intro video? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you know.
I like the I remember Javier after I think it was KubeCon, he sort of highlighted one of the IBM presentations about kind of, I remember it was like moving left, but like the idea that the app developer worries about their source code and the operator worries about the dependencies, and that separation of responsibilities is what we provide.
Right.
Right. So I don't know if you necessarily need to have a different video for each persona if you're making it very clear that like what we are providing is this separation, then it might speak to each person in its own way.
Yeah, I think the maybe the point, the last point, right? Like I totally agree with all that. I think the point where maybe we've been lacking and has created some uncertainty or, you know, lack of clarity is the fact that it's a spec project and we don't provide all of the tooling, right? Like, for instance, people will come to this project and say, hey, do you have a build pack that does static host, you know, static site hosting? And we're like, no, we don't provide any build packs at all, actually, right? So I think people look at this project as like a one-stop shop for the entire solution. And I guess what I'm kind of maybe advocating for is that we be upfront and saying that, hey, we're primarily a, you know, this like mechanism, right? But it's really all these other, I use vendors for the lack of a better term, that are really providing the solutions around it. And I, you know, again, that isn't the best example that, or the best way I could interpret this, but I think that's what's speaking to the complexity of presenting our project.
What if we frame it as like we are like, because I don't think the average person necessarily really cares that we don't author the build packs. They just want to find the build pack, right? And the distinction between the project and the vendors is maybe less important to them. So I agree with you, but I think we could frame it as like we provide the spec and we provide, you know, maybe highlighting the registry search, like we provide a conduit to all of this partners who are providing build pack implementations, and look at all the build packs you can find. Like there's a way to phrase it that's
right.
That's I don't know.
See, and I like
sense.
that. I like the way that you framed it, right? Like I really do, right? I guess what I was getting at is that right now it didn't sound like we were gonna try to do anything like that. But the way that you put it, I think makes a lot of sense. I think that's what I'm looking for, right? Is somebody to come up with a way that we could say like, you know, build packs isn't the, I'm gonna use a term Anthony and I have been using, the household name, right? Build packs isn't the household name. You're not gonna go and search for a build pack of whatever, right? It's going to be used potentially most likely in some sort of backend, right? Like Google Cloud platform, right? Like, or GitLab as part of AutoOps, right? Like it's in a lot of cases like an underlying technology that is portable and can be used in a lot of different platforms. So I know, again, I know I'm adding complexity to this, but I think it's, again, trying to add that clarity.
So how do we move forward, given that we've articulated many good ideas, but I think we need to actually produce something concrete to take the next step forward?
I would maybe recommend a workshop. Right. I don't know if office hours would be maybe too large of an audience, but definitely at least within this meeting, set up a time or dedicated, scheduled event that we say, okay, today we're going to go in there and just literally discuss what this intro video would look like, and set up a mural board, right? And just like start putting together, like, okay, what do we want to present? What don't we want? Like, what do we not want to present? And then maybe at least get to a point where we could say, okay, based on at least this information, what we were trying to like show, we should maybe create this like creative script this way.
I think some of the data points from the user interviews might be also like, and you said workshop, and I know Sam wanted to have a workshop, so maybe we can marry them somehow. That might be nice.
I like this idea.
Cool. I guess, yeah, do you mind at least driving that?
Yeah, sure. I
as an
can bring
action
this
item?
up in the office hours this week.
Yeah, and then maybe just kind of broadcasting it out that we want to do this and what we're trying to achieve from
Yeah,
this, and maybe
sure.
setting up the mural board and making sure that everybody could access it. I think that's
Sure.
going to be
Sounds good.
something to double check. Cool.
Thanks for your idea.
All right. Cool. All right. Next topic, guidelines and build packs. Is that what BP stands for?
Best practices, sorry.
Best practices. Okay. I don't know. You're in a build packs world. BP stands for build packs.
Yeah, I started with an initial draft of that RFC, which we discussed in the last office hours. But like it's not complete yet, and I don't know if everyone here was in the last office hours, but what we discussed was there are a few things that um, are not captured by the spec. That still makes sense to go in some document where we say that over time we've noticed that these are some guidelines or best practices for different personas who are dealing with build packs. So for build pack users, you want some best practices. For authors, you want something else. For, let's say, operators, you want something, and similarly for like platform implementers. So it sort of ties into what we were just discussing. Like apart from introduction, you also want some guidelines for each of these personas who are using our tooling. And the RFC is just about whether we should create a repository like this, and what should be sort of like the overall high-level content and structure of that repository. And it doesn't actually go into details on like what the actual the set of guidelines would be. Just is an RFC about like possibly creating a repository like this, and um, what could go into it.
Cool. So I think you gave us a pretty good overview of what this is. Personally, I haven't looked at it. So I'd like some time to do so. Does anybody have any questions on this? Is it my understanding that this would only be a repository with, essentially markdown files and not so much something that is presented on the docs website? And is there a reason for that direction?
Uh, I mean, not. I mean, we could also put it in the docs website, I guess. Um, in which case, it might just be a subfolder in the docs repository. Um, but yeah, like as I said, open to ideas. I think the only reason why it could be a separate repository is that if you want like a different process for reviewing and merging guidelines than we do for documentation. Um, that was the only concern, that if you want something more formal to go into the guidelines, then what happens with the documentation? But if not, and if the process is the same, then it can just be a subfolder in the docs repository.
Well, do you mind making that acknowledgement or statement as an alternative
Yeah.
in the RFC? I think it would, spin up some good discussion there.
Hey, young Samuel, can I ask, um, if you could just sum up the motivation for me just a little bit, right? Like if you have best practices in a code base, it's because multiple people are going to be collaborating, right? And you want to lessen the learning curve for each people, right? To keep consistency. I'm guessing, if you could just sum up the motivation for best practices in like spec authoring, Buildpack authoring, I guess, platform authoring.
Yeah, so I have some of them in the RFC, but like I'll just read out the headline. So, like better consistency and user experience for users and authors across different ecosystems. So let's say you're you're familiar with ecosystem X that configures its build packs using a certain way, and now you're moving to ecosystem Y for whatever reason. Uh, Maybe just some consistency amongst the two. Uh, Similarly, like like another point is better portability amongst different platforms. So let's say your build pack relies on certain details of how pack is implemented as a platform as opposed to something else like kpack, for example. So let's say it allows configuration only through like uh, I guess project.toml files, which like the project descriptor, which like back implements, but other platforms don't. Then you may be like causing issues. Similarly, like as a build pack author, there may be certain pitfalls around like how you're using the API, where you might not discover issues with them initially, but later on, as like you get more experience, you're sort of like relearning what others have already figured out by using the API. So those were some of the motivations, and I've tried to give some concrete examples for each of them. Um, and yeah.
Thank you. That was very insightful. All right. Any other questions on this one? Okay, so an action item out of this would be to go ahead and review this RFC, add any feedback to it, if you may. And yeah, we could review it again when the time comes. Moving on, DockerCon CFP. Sam, I believe you put that on there as well.
Yeah, I mean, this was just spawned off the message you sent on Slack, but I noticed the same thing that DockerCon has a CFP out, so I was wondering if there, there was any plan for like any talk or something.
Yeah, I don't think that we organize, as a whole community or project to speak at any given conference, with the exception of KubeCon, because it's, part of the CNCF and they essentially hold a slot for us. But outside of that, I think we ultimately leave it up to the community members to represent the project, those that either have the capacity to do so or the desire to do so. I don't know if there's an expectation or desire for that to change, but I think that's been at least operating procedure.
You got it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think maybe at this point, right, like at least what I was doing on Slack was just bringing up the opportunity and then again, letting the individuals decide whether or not they wanted to attend. I think it definitely seems like it would be a good idea if we were to organize a little bit better so that we do have some representation. I just know, like, I'm gonna again speak personally for myself. I don't have the time to go and do a presentation, and especially when a lot of conferences would hope or expect you to have like a unique presentation, right? So like they wouldn't like you to essentially reuse a presentation that you were previously used. I think that that makes the effort a little bit more difficult.
Something that would be interesting for me, maybe for the implementation team to discuss later on, but like I've seen a lot of talks on like how Buildpacks work in a high level overview, and in none of the deep dives do we actually go into how like the life cycle actually works. Um, like we do describe the phases and everything, but I've not seen a talk where like it describes how it works with and creates like OCI compatible images. So that would be very interesting as a talk. But again, just a suggestion.
So when we typically say Buildpacks deep dive, we're literally talking about the Buildpacks API most likely, right? Or
Yeah.
most of the time, and not the deep dive into
Yeah.
how this is actually achieved.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Do we think, because I feel that such a talk, it would be interesting for me to watch, right? And anyone who contributes to the life cycle, I feel like we would enjoy having such a talk. But do we think that the general audience of like DockerCon attendees might, who've like maybe never even heard of Buildpacks before, would be interested in going into that level of, I think that's why, honestly, that all of the talks that are out there are like, this is how Buildpacks work. And by the time you've explained that, your 25 minutes is up, right? So it's a challenge. And I think I agree that presenting some new information would be valuable. I just don't know how to also hook in the more casual listener. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So like the talk that reminds me of is like there's this talk by Liz Rice, which is like containers from scratch, which like it goes into a lot of nitty-gritty details on like how to create containers from scratch, but it also sort of keeps it high level. But like something similar where you start from saying that you have these pieces of information, now how do you assemble them together in 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 form of an output image that I, I guess the audience would be niche, but it's a nice way of like knowing how the OCI spec is like flexible enough to accommodate a use case like Buildpacks versus something that people are mostly familiar with, which is like Docker. So even something like Builder has like similar semantics where you have run, copy, and etc. Instead of a Docker file, you have different commands. But Buildpacks are unique because we don't have like the sort of manual instructions on how to modify the image, but rather that's all captured by detect and build parts of the Buildpacks, and then you have a higher level orchestrator that manages all of this. So that's sort of where I was getting at, that even though life cycle itself may be a concept that may be new to them, but like just how it works to orchestrate all of these things together may be interesting for people who are familiar with like, the OCI spec or container images in general. Like we're at the end of the day, it's a container image, and I guess DockerCon may be a good venue for people who like for advanced users who do know details of these things and may be interested in how an alternative technology like Buildpacks achieves the same.
Yeah, I think a similar project that I think still does a pretty good job of presenting its maybe internal workings is something like Container D, right? Like nobody goes and uses Container D directly, but you could certainly find, presentations about Container D. And so I think maybe it goes back to the idea again that we speak to so many different audiences. And I think what Sam is bringing up is that we haven't spoken to the audience where, they're like really in the weeds of how this works.
I'd be open to working on something like that. I think I sort of share a little bit of Javier's, like, it's a lot of work, but if that's something that, Sam, if you feel like you'd be up for it, and you're looking for a collaborator, I think we can help out.
I'll go check the CFP, like since it's closing on 1st, I'll check what it actually requires. If it's just an abstract, and if the deadline is like, I'll check what the deadline for the actual like some content is, if there is a deadline for the actual content is, and I'll let you know with Slack.
All right, so it does seem like we've gone a couple minutes over. So I do want to say this was a very, insightful conversation in a lot of aspects, but we do have to cut it short. All right. With that said, any parting words? All right, have a great week, all. See you later.